Didn't come. I didn't see it. They said she went away with somebody else. She said, no, she started screaming. My grandmother was screaming because nobody would tell her who my mother went away with. They openly they do that, you know. If a fellow wants you, you don't want him, he'll kidnap you. And away you go. So anyway, anyhow. Now my mother had to live with her mother-in-law. There was nothing to eat in that house. They used to eat black bread. Well, my father, as he was walking to go to work, used to work on a farm, used to pass my grandmother's house. Then she found out.
This movie's gonna look like The Killer Whale with her.
So she says,
Go sit somewhere else.
she says, who did she marry? Her sister says to her, you shut up. She said, this is my grandmother's sister. Tell her, you shut up, because she married Salvatore Conte. She said, oh, Salvatore Conte, my daughter's going to starve, because he was very poor. Well, anyway, my mother was a skeleton. Her mother wouldn't forgive her. She wouldn't forgive her for nothing, but she used to feed her son-in-law. So my father was nice and healthy. My mother was dying. Till her sister went and told her, if you want to see your daughter? She said, no, I don't want to see her. Well, you'll see her in her coffin, because that's where she's going to end up. So then my grandmother sent for her. And they made up. And then my mother made a big platter, homemade macaroni. She said, I join this together.
Your mother?
My grandmother made for my mother and her husband a big dish of macaroni. She says, I join this together. You always have to eat out of the same dish. Never separate. And they did. Whenever it was macaroni though, she'd make a big platter and she'd put a lot of cheese on. And my mother would take all the top, although she'd take all the cheese from my mother. But they lived a life, a happy life. I used to say that my mother was so tough. And so tough. She was married. Now my father came to this country. First he went in the army. Then he came
After they were married?
After they were married, he went in the army. He was only 19 when he went in the army. She was left home with her mother. Now before my father went in the army, he had a little dog. He left it to my mother. He says, this, you take care of my dog. And his name was Viparelli.
What was his name?
Viparelli.
I never heard this story before.
Viparelli. His dog's name was Viparelli. He gave it to my mother. So my grandfather was crazy about this little puppy. It wasn't a little puppy. It was quite a little nice dog. So they used to go out in the woods and chop down the trees and make wood for their fire. My mother used to carry those big things like this on her head, just to make that run on her head. She was only 13 and a half. So one day there was another man there with a dog of his. He had a big dog. The big dog come and chased my grandfather with his little dog. So the little dog bit the big one. So now that man was going to hit the dog, and my grandmother says, you leave that dog alone.
You mean your mother?
But no. That man that had the other dog, that dog bit my grandfather's dog. That was my father's dog.
Okay.
He left it to my grandfather, not to his father, not to my mother. And my mother says, go ahead, let your dog come over here. You come over here and you touch this dog. He says, you? He says, you shut up, because with my kicks, I'll split your squat. My mother says, you'll what?
So much for showing this to the Monsignor.
She had a hat. She had the hatchet, you know, with the striped part and then the round part. She takes that hatchet and she goes up to him and she hits him right over the head with the hatchet. And then she ran. She dropped the hatchet and she ran. And she ran to another town. She left that town because she figured she killed him. Now, time passes, and they wrote to my grandfather. My grandfather, after a while, he came to this country. Came here, and my mother was away. He said she was safe because she was away. But she didn't kill him. He was in the hospital. He gets better this year. She gets word but meanwhile, my grandfather from here got all the paperwork in order for her to run away from Italy and come to this country. She gets the word that he was not murdered. So now, they used to go to the funeral to wash clothes. That's by the river. They used to wash clothes and dry the clothes over the big stones. And they're washing clothes there. And it came like a V, this way. So my mother was on one side and these other women were on this side. because somebody went over to this man's wife, because she also was washing clothes that day. She says, you see that young girl over there? That's the girl that hit your husband over the head with the hatchet. Oh, yeah? She said, well, you tell her that my husband's waiting for her. First place he finds spots, he'll kill her. So she went back and told my mother. My mother had in her sleeve, she had a dagger in her sleeve, and she had a gun in her pocket. She says to her, you see this dagger? I carry it for him. And you see this gun? I carry it also for him. Because if I miss him with the dagger, I'll get him with the gun. But she went home and she told her husband. And she met this man out in the woods a lot of times, chopping wood or whatever, going for water. He never looked at her again. Never looked at her. And that was one of my favorite stories. Now, Ma, tell me about that time when you eloped with Pop, and tell me about the time with that man. And I had a lot of beautiful memories of her. That's why when I met my husband, I was not afraid to tell her because she was so strong. I say to myself, how did she have so many kids? She's so tough. How should I finally get near her? But when it come to love, you couldn't meet a more understanding mother than her.
Hey,
All
Mom.
the time.
Mom, come here. Tell Johnny about the time about the castor oil.
Oh, my
Castor
mother,
oil
every
with Grandpa.
Friday night was physic night. Castor oil every Friday night. So she used to get she had a big spoon, big tablespoon. She'd fill up, you had to take 2 tablespoons. She'd put sugar on top of the castor oil. I said, oh, Mom, you gotta count. You gotta count 1, 2, and 3. And 3, I'll take it. So she used to go 1, 2. No, I had to go, you gotta go 1 1/2. She used to go 1, and I make her do it all. My father used to get so mad. He used to take the spoon and drink the castor oil. He used to drink the castor oil himself. He used to get so he drank more castor oil. Not so that she wouldn't have us. But we had to take it. She used to put us on her lap, squeeze our nose, shove it down our throat. We had to take castor oil every Friday night. That was a ritual with her.
It's tough with 9 people in one bathroom.
Really?
We're all taking physics on the
Really?
same
Yeah.
night.
Well, then my brothers, they were something. Everybody knew Tony Conti's mother. She used to work in the jute mill. She used to come home all full of dust and all.
In the what?
In the jute mill.
What's that?
It was a jute mill. It was to work with cotton. I never went in it, but she used to work on McBride Avenue jute mill. Now the boys, they used to, after school, we all had our chores to do. I used to have to do the stove, light the stove, clean the house, and put the beans on or whatever I had to do. She used to leave the orders. The boys had to go downstairs, they had to get the coal, had to get the wood, bring it upstairs. They didn't come home like sometimes. They wouldn't come home from school. So one time there was a little boy next door that wanted to go with my brothers. They were going up the back race. They were going to go swimming. They used to swim naked up the back race. So they were going, Tony and Jerry were going with all other boys, and they wouldn't bring this boy. His name was Pebble, nicknamed Pebble. They wouldn't bring him. He waited for my mother. Hey, Rose, you know where they are? Down up the back race. They're swimming naked up there. So my mother had just come home from work. She was so tired. She runs up the back race. That's the back way of McBride Avenue. You know where the mill is on the corner of Mill Street and Penhoughton Street?
Mhm.
In that corner, well, around that corner, there was a bridge. It used to go right through, and it used to come out on McBride Avenue. Come right through, and the boys used to go swimming there. So my mother, she goes there, but she goes around the other side. She had to walk across a big pole, like one of those telephone poles, in the water. The boys could walk across this, you know? So the boys were on the other side. They were all standing, and they all jumped in the water. It was, Tony Conti's mother's here, Tony. And they all dove in the water. She's walking on this pole. She's going to go on the other side. She's going to get her 2 sons on the other side. They were such rascals. They dove underneath, and they shook that pole, and they made her fall. As she fell in the water, now, she spit nails. She couldn't catch the boys. She couldn't catch them, so she went home. Don't worry, they gotta come home. They have to come home. So imagine my father come home from work, the boys come home, they come home, she didn't say a word to them, nothing. They sat down and we ate. She didn't say a word. After a while, We all went, I used to sleep with my brothers. I was small. They slept on the top and I slept on the bottom. So my father, when it was 6 o'clock, he used to go to work. He used to work all night and come home 6 o'clock in the morning. So everything was fine. We all went to bed. Everything was fine. And we had fallen asleep. I hear her come in. She grabs my brothers. She drags them out of bed. She ties their hands in the back. She drags them out. She puts them under her bed. Tony on one side, Jerry on the side. She tied their hands in the back and their feet. She let them stay. So I started to cry. And she went back in bed. That was her bed that they were on the floor. I started to cry, so I got up and I sneaked to untie them. So she heard me. Oh, she said, you want to sleep with your brothers? She tied my hands too, and I slept on the floor with my brothers. And that's what my father found us when he came home in the morning. And he didn't dare say a word to her. That was her way of disciplining the whole family. Another time, my mother had a big belly like this. She was pregnant, I think, for Yolanda. She was not a big belly, she was pregnant. I came home from school. I came home like a lousy Victoria of the store. She just squeal on me. And Elfie didn't come home from school. She came home late. But I used to do, I was like the wind. I used to do everything. Shake the stove, shake the ashes, make the stove, put the beef, make the bed. I used to do everything. She didn't care. I didn't come home on time. And that lady at the store, she used to squeal on me. So she says to me, where did you go today after school? And I said, Mom, I had to stay in. Tell me where you went. You didn't have to stay in. You tell me where you went. Where'd you go with your girl? I didn't go no place. I said, so she runs after me, and I run under the bed. I ran under the bed. Now she's got this big belly, you know. She's on the floor on her knees. She's got to come after me under the bed. I come out on the other side. I laid on top of the bed, and she's stuck. She's stuck in the middle of the bed, and she's aggravated. Oh, I was terrified of her. She was aggravated, and I'm under the bed like this with my hand like this, and I'm looking at her. So she couldn't come to me, and she couldn't get out. We had the pot. No, the pot in those days, there was no toilets.
The thunder mug.
We had the what?
The thunder mug under the bed.
Well, whatever you want to call it. The cover had a piece out. It was broke. So she took that cover and she threw it at me and she caught me right here. She almost cut my hand off. I'm out like this with my hand and still being afraid of her. I'm like this. She got out. She got out from under that bed. She says, oh my God, my father says to her, you cut your daughter's hand off. And he started hollering at her. She had to rush me to the doctor. He stitched this all up. He says to her, for one hair, you would have cut her vein. For one hair, she would have lost her hand. So my father says to her, if you don't stop the way you're like an animal when you hit these kids. He stitched this all up for me, and that's the scar that I have. Just because I was laughing at her. She was like, she would have killed me. She cut my hand. That's the scar I have. She's got another scar too.
Yeah, she really listened to her husband, because look what she did to me. Right here. What happened to you? She hit me with a we were living upstairs, and she had a glass, right? So I couldn't reach the sink because I was a lonely little kid. So I got the chair, and I put the chair in front of the sink. And I went to stretch to get the glass. When I went to stretch to get the glass fell in the sink. So we used to have the wooden stove. They used to burn the wood. So she took the stick and she hit me. But she didn't know there was a nail on the end of the stick. And when she hit me, I got a mark over here, and now this is what I'm wearing for my mother. Because she really listened to her husband. He says, watch those kids, you're gonna kill them one of these days. She tried, but she didn't. And then she turned around and she said, and don't you run away. Because if you run away, I'll find you. And when I find you, I'll kill you. And I'm like, oh, she's gonna kill me. I was terrified.
I used to get it. These kids were small. We used to go to New York every Saturday night. Yolanda, Angie's sister-in-law, which was Sal's sister, and myself.
And I used to sleep in the middle between my mother and my father.
Yeah, she used to sleep between well, she was small.
I was only small.
I used to go 3 o'clock in the morning and read the funnies on the floor while Anyway, we used to go to New York every Saturday. Sometimes we used to come home late. So this one particular time, we came home late. Walking up the stairs, I went up first, but the back stairs was always dark. I was always afraid of going down that damn hall. I walked up the stairs, I walked across the hall, I opened the door, the house was dark. I opened the door, I walked in, I went the lights, and POW! With her hand. She got me right across my face like this. I was stunned.
And I was in bed laughing.
I said to Yolanda, okay, this time, I never went in first anymore. From that, after that, I used to push her to go first. She used to go first all the time.
And then my mother used to take me to the beach. Take to the beach. I was the only kid who went in the water and never got wet. So she used to have the ropes, right? Grandma was here, and she had her arms around me like this, right? And when the wave used to come, oh, Bella and Mom, she used to take the wave, put me on top of the little wave, and then put me down. And I never got wet. Got wet. Then when I used to come home, we used to get out of the water. She said to me, you get one thing, or ice cream cone, or the merry-go-round. So I always picked, because Vidaria, which was the lady downstairs with the store that used to squeal on her all the time, she loved me. I was like a daughter to her.
Oh, yeah.
So she really loved me. And so whatever my mother didn't give me, she used to get. So if I picked the ice cream cone, she'd put me on the merry-go-round, or vice versa. But I tell you, that was really funny. Go in the water, I never got wet. Never got wet.
I gotta tell you, when I met my husband,
Who's out there?
I met my husband, and we went to Idlewild Park, and I met him, but he had, there were two fellas. I didn't go with my husband, I went with his boyfriend, so he was stuck with Edith. Edith was Silvio's friend, Silvio's cousin and my girlfriend. She lived 2 doors away from me. So he thought he wasn't going to see me. He says to her, listen, he said, I want to go out with Flo. He says, but now, he says, she's with my boyfriend, and we all got on the bus. There was no cars at the time. He said, I want you to tell her that I'm going to meet her by the Fabian, the theater, by the Fabian. She never told me. She went and meet him herself. So she says, oh, Flo's going to meet us here. Let's go inside. So they went inside, and he sat in the last row, and he's waiting and waiting. And he says to her, well, when is Florence coming? Oh, she said, I didn't tell her. Oh, you didn't tell her. You got up and you walked out and you left her there. Then I was sitting outside, and the phone, the guy, Mr. Skinny next door, said to me, there's a telephone call for you. I said, who the hell knows me? We didn't have no phone. It was him. He had found a phone number at 34 Cross Street. And he had called Franceschini, and he called me. We were sitting outside. Well, when I went in there and it was him, he says to me, he said, you were supposed to come to the film. I said, well, she never told me. He says, now, he said, I want to see you. I want to see you tomorrow, which was on the Sunday. I said, okay. All right. And I told my mother, I said, Mom, it wasn't one of my girlfriends, like the line. Come Sunday, I forgot that it was the Holy Name Parade. He used to play in the band. So he never came. So she was laughing. I said to her, you know something? I bet he's playing in the parade. So we ran a Manor Market to see if we could see the band. But that band had already passed because we were late. The band had started. Back we went, and I sat in front of her. So she was laughing. And I was burning up. So she went home for dinner, and I said to my mother, Mom, I want to tell you a story. Because the first time that I spoke to my mother on even terms with her, that I was able to communicate with her, I said, Ma, I don't want you to get mad, but I want to tell you the truth. And I told her exactly what happened. She said, so that's what your girlfriend did? Well, she said, if he calls you, you'll bring him here. You'll bring him upstairs. I will welcome him. I'll be the judge if you're going to go out with this guy. The same thing happened. He calls me Franceschini again. And he told me, he says, I had to play in a band. I couldn't reach you. He says, but can I come down? I says, yes, you can come down. He came down. And when my mother saw him, I brought him upstairs. When my mother saw him, she fell in love with him. Oh, he was so handsome. So we went to the movies, and she never said anything. He made a date for the following Saturday. came down, that was the second time. She says to sit down. I thought, oh my God. Just to sit down, just to listen. Want to go out with my daughter? Okay. She's 18 years old. I watched her, 18. Now, you watch her. If you miss a step, my daughter, you see the yard in the back? I'll bury you and I'll bury her. So he says, no. He says, you know, Mrs. Conk, he says, I have sisters too. He said, I would never do anything to her. And my mother was crazy about it. Till the day she died, she was crazy about it. I think that when she died, she's the one that prayed. She always would tell me, go find your husband. Go find your husband. And she always, she's, if I can help you from where I'm going, I will help you. I'll pray for you. So I'm going to die. She said, leaving you alone. You're going to be by yourself. I didn't want that. My father told me the same thing. I used to dress my father's toes because he had gangrene. I had the patients do it twice. They just dress his toes. He said to me, feet up belly. He said, if your father goes to the other world, he says, and if I could do anything, pray for you, because I will go back to your husband. After I lost my mother, I told him, I said, you know something? I don't know why this guy's coming in my mind like this. All of a sudden, I start thinking about him. Out of nowhere. He was on my mind constant, so I had to go to the unemployment office. Saw my sister-in-law there, Josephine. I went over to her. That's why sometimes I say, you do make your own destiny. I went over to her, and I know she was so surprised to see me. I hadn't seen her for years. And I asked her, I says, how is everything? She says, how's your, I said, how's Freddie? She said, you want to see him? And I said, yes. That's how I made up with him. When we slept in that bedroom, my mother, we put the bed in my mother's room, he said that night he felt her hand go right across his face. I believe he was sleeping. He didn't see her. He said it wasn't a twilight dream. He said she just stroked his face. I said she loved him. Just to call him her cavalier, she loved him. She always loved Fred. And then I had my father's picture, bottom of the hall. He says to me, what's your father's picture do? He took it up, he brought it upstairs, he put it in the bedroom. My father's picture. He loved my father. My father loved him.
Aunt Flo, what were your grandparents in?
What were they? My grandmother and my grandpa, they had money.
Which grandparents?
The grandmother on
Mama's
my
side.
mother's side. Now on my father's side, my grandfather, he was 7 foot. And he was King's Guard. He used to travel with the king. So when he used to come into town, he used to come down the mountain, come into town, he used to come on a horse with a plume on it. It was a feast. But he always came home broke. She used to reach up to his waist. His wife, she was so small. I'm surprised. Only Helen came small. And he was an Italian. They were called Corazzieri. He was the king's Corazzieri. He was the king's. But there's no record or no picture because the municipal building in Modelo burned and all the records died. But that's what he did. He went after the king. He went over.
And they had 4 children, right? 2 brothers and a sister.
And he had a sister now. He had 3 brothers and a sister now. My father was the best one though.
Was he the youngest?
Now, I have to tell you another time. This was a New Year's Eve.
Was he the youngest, Papa? No.
Papa was the baby.
Oh.
New Year's Eve, my mother,
kids, Papa.
the 2 brothers lived together on Bank Street. They lived together. So I used to go by the other brother, Dominic. And he had a store. So he used to have a room in the back to play cards, and he used to sell wine. So my father and his other brother, Mariano, used to go and help him in the store. This was New Year's Eve. They didn't come home. It's 12 o'clock and one of the men didn't come home. So the 2 wives, with the kid, Jerry was small, Tony was small. They're waiting, no. So all of a sudden, my mother sees them coming. She says to her sister, you shut up, because they're not going to come in the house. If you make one sound, she says, I'll hit you. Don't you make a sound. They're not coming in the house. Now, they had, outside of the door, they had a big barrel like this, all full of pickled peppers and pickled beets. It was cold in the hall. That's what they used to keep it. So they come upstairs, they knock at the door, nothing. Uncle Mariano knocked at the door. Anjuli, are you inside there, Anjuli? No sound. They went by Grandma Joanella's house. Maybe they went over there, the Matoria, the Matorios? Those first.
You don't know them. You don't look them.
Well, he went by them. No, she wasn't there. So my father says, well, where could they be? Let's go back. Maybe they came home. They went back, and they knocked at the door, nothing. They were hungry. They started eating those peppers, and they started eating them. So my uncle, he started saying, they're inside. They don't want them, but they couldn't. Nobody would. The kids didn't make a sound, because she had kids, not a sound. They went down, they went across the street. I said, we're gonna look at the house. Watch the house. My brother Jerry went and moved the curtain. He said, they're in the house. Back they went. Banged on that door. Uncle Mariano said, if you don't open the door, we'll break it down because we know you're in there. He said, Anjali, don't listen to Rizadi. You better open the door. You better listen to me. She don't want to listen to her husband, but you better listen to me. She opened the door. When he got in, he slapped her. And he kept slapping her. My mother went like this by my father. Go ahead. Let me see you do it. Let me see you do it. Let me see you do what he's doing. Let me see. And she's standing like a soldier. He says to her, he said, that wasn't nice. he says, I feel sick. So then pick up and you start throwing up on her.
I never heard that story.
I never did it.
He started throwing up all over him because the pickled peppers made him sick. So he says, and she was standing there looking at him, with her hands on her hips, like a regular tough guy. And he says to her, no, that wasn't nice. It was freezing and the snow, and you don't let us come in the house. She says to him, what time are you supposed to come home? You're supposed to come home at 7 o'clock? You see what time it is? It's 4 o'clock in the morning. You just come home? She says, you're lucky that she opened the door, because I don't give a shit what he said. Worse than me, you would have never come in. And Mariana says to my mother, you should have been my wife. She says, yeah, I should have been your wife. She says, you'd have never touched me. She says, I would kick you right between your germs, your gems. I mean, your gems. Your gems. And she always used to tell me that story. I used to love to hear it. Mom, tell me where Papa threw up. But my father never touched her. One time.
He didn't dare.
Only one time we were in a yard, and Nicky, Nicky DeSpirito, he had the cake pastry shop.
He
Passed the
wouldn't
pastry. The DeSpirito pastry shop on Market Street. Well, they lived side by side, like a duplex up across the street. My mother on this side and she on that side. The two kids, Carl and Nicky, were playmates, Nicky takes a hammer, hits Carl over the head, right in the middle of his head with a hammer. Oh, my mother, you touch her kid, she'll kill you. My mother started going after him, and they had a big fight. Now they weren't speaking. I don't know what happened this one time. She always used to call my mother Manja Vazuli, and Manja Vazuli. And my mother used to say to her, I eat beans with honor. I don't know what you did, because you got married several times. So I don't know what you are. I know what I am. I might have eaten beans, but I was full of honor. So,
That's an Anna Magnani statement, John.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
so now she's up on the 3rd floor, and they both got bellies like this. And my mother's in the yard. She says to my mother, she swore at my mother. She says, she used some kind of a dirty word. I remember this. I witnessed this myself. My mother, we had bricks in the yard. She dug her hand in that ground. She pulled out a brick. It wasn't cemented. They were loose. She pulled, and she threw it up on the 3rd floor. She threw that brick up there and just missed her by a hair. So my father, when he saw that, he got so, because she was going for another brick, he slapped her in the face. What a mistake he made. He slapped her in the face. So he says to her, if you hit her, you would have killed her. She says to him, she went right up to him and she says to him, listen, it's too bad that you're my husband. Because she says to him, I can break your neck, but if I put my hands on you, I'll lose all respect for you. She said, but I'll never talk to you again. She would have grabbed